know we talk a lot here about Hollywood and acting, and I was in an acting class one time, and there was this very unusual woman that would come to class, and she was lovely, but just very unusual. There was always something a little different. You have that feeling, especially if you read people well. And a couple people would kind of rumor that, she has a gun, right? And we're, kind of like, well, obviously, at least she would never bring it to class, et cetera, et cetera. And then one day she was in class and she went to go up on stage to do her scene, and she left her purse wide open and there was a pistol inside, and people saw it, and people started really freaking out. Well, she claimed it was a stage pistol. I don't think it was, but needless to say, she was no longer welcome in that class. But, again, it's like, at what point do you investigate and cause a disruption? And at what point do you worry about everyone else in that environment being in danger of someone who might not be super balanced?
Welcome to MetaGagement, the HR show that dives deep into the heart of employee engagement and workplace culture. Your hosts, Ann Scottlin and Dr. Lyman Montgomery, bring you a groundbreaking show that explores innovative strategies and insights to transform and elevate your organization's HR practices. Dr. Montgomery is an employee engagement expert and best-selling author, while Ann Scottlin is an acclaimed business consultant and podcaster. Together, they will unpack the complexities of modern HR challenges and reveal innovative solutions that can be immediately applied to your workplace. Please welcome Ann Scottlin and Dr. Lyman Montgomery.
Welcome back to MetaGagement-HR. We're so glad you're here with us today. With me is my co-host, Dr. Lyman Montgomery. I'm Ann Scottlin, and we are a podcast dedicated to transforming the way you approach human resources. We talk about innovation, we talk about evidence-based practices, and we talk about how you can go meta. We'll talk more about that later. So we're excited to launch a brand new series today, focusing on an essential yet often challenging aspect of HR, and that is conducting workplace investigations. But before we start, please do us a big favor and like and subscribe on whatever platform you're watching or listening to today, and copy and paste this link. Share it with a friend who might enjoy jumping in with us. So, Lyman, tell us a little bit more about what we're going to talk today: investigative excellence and laying the groundwork for fairness.
Yeah, when it comes to, as you mentioned, sometimes the hard work within HR is when there's a policy violation or some type of event. One of the crucial steps in finding out the truth is conducting a workplace investigation. So today we want to talk about what are some of the pre-steps, some of the essential steps, and also some of the things that are often overlooked when it comes to beginning or initiating a workplace investigation. Should you do it yourself? Should you outsource it? Should you find someone maybe within the department to do it? So we want to talk about, those key steps to doing it correctly to make sure that you get to the truth as much as you can as to what actually happened, so that you can take the necessary steps to correct the behavior going forward.
So basically, you get to be a detective within your own environment, which has a lot of pros and cons when you're working with those people.
Absolutely. And not only that, but it's really about making sure that the work environment is safe and that people operate at a level of integrity so that everyone feels valued, they have a sense of a voice, and that you deal with disruptions in the workplace quickly, swiftly, but also do it in a way that promotes healthy growth and does not demean nor detracts from carrying out the mission of your business, whatever that might be. If that's increasing revenue, which it should be, or if you're a nonprofit, making sure that you carry out the work, the philanthropic work that you've been chartered to do.
So understanding the importance of a well-defined investigation process is really critical. And let's start out by discussing the role of investigations in maintaining workplace integrity. I love that because maintaining workplace integrity is something we talk about all the time, and also
Yes.
it's part of going meta. So let's discuss why, through investigations, why they're crucial for maintaining trust, integrity within the organization.
Yeah. When it comes to maintaining integrity and building that trust or maintaining that trust, it's a sense of fairness that
Hmm.
if there is a problem, at what level should the problem be addressed? Well, in order to know that, there has to be some level of a conversation or an investigation. Now, the difference between a conversation and an interrogation is that the process should be open. It should allow the person to speak freely, and it should not begin with why. Well, why did you do this? That comes across as being accusatory. You're making accusations. The early part is just asking open ended questions based on what you know so far. And sometimes you may not know a lot. You might, for example, receive the complaint that uh, two people were overheard arguing, and someone mentioned um, they're going to come to the workplace with a weapon, and that's all the information that you have. And so that kind of begins that process of making what we call in HR a threat assessment. How reliable is this information, and is it something that we need to act on immediately? Obviously, if someone threatens to bring a weapon, explosive to the workplace, that's not something you're going to sit on. That's something that you need to take swift and immediate action, because you don't know if the person just blowing out steam or if it's a viable threat.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, yeah, I remember. I know we talk a lot here about Hollywood and acting, and I was in an acting class one time, and there was this very unusual woman that would come to class, and she was lovely, but just very unusual. There was always something
Hmm.
a little different. You have that feeling, especially if you read people well. And a couple people would kind of rumor that, she has a gun, right? And we're, you know, kind of like, well, obviously, at least she would never bring it to class, et cetera, et cetera. So just she wasn't an employee, but a student. It was kind of just thinking, is that the gossip, right?
Right.
And then one day she was in class and she went to go up on stage to do her scene, and she left her purse wide open and there was a pistol inside, and people
Yeah.
saw it and people started really freaking out. Well, she claimed it was a stage pistol. I don't think it was, but needless to say, she was no longer welcome in that class. But again, it's like, at what point do you investigate and cause a disruption, and at what point do you worry about everyone else in that environment being in danger of someone who might not be super balanced?
Yeah. And you bring up a good point, and that is at what point to ensure the safety of yourself, but also the safety of others. And that's what has to be the foreboding thought is, okay, I might believe that this person wouldn't create any type of harm, but do others believe that? And I have to look out for the best interest of others. And that's why you have to take action. And so I think there's three things that I recommend that a person do whenever they receive information. And understand, early on, you don't have all of the facts. You may just have a rumor, as you mentioned earlier. But what do you do with that? You have to be able to track down that rumor to a source and conduct what we call preliminary interviews. Hey, it's my understanding that you overheard two individuals arguing, and one of them mentioned bringing a firearm. Tell me more about it. So you're trying to create a situation where people want to talk to you. Let's say they're like, oh, well, come to find out, they was actually talking about a movie they saw. So I just happened to hear a gun and freaked out. Well, you still have to cancel that out by talking with the individual to see how plausible is it. Has this person been in trouble before? Has this person made threats? Second thing is setting clear expectations. Let's say that the person was just blowing off steam. I think you need to make it very clear that that behavior, those conversations are not acceptable, and there should be something written in the file.
Mm-hmm.
Because you cannot just say, well, he really didn't mean it. She didn't mean it. They were just upset, because you don't know. All of us have watched in horror those news where they say, well, I thought he wasn't serious. I didn't know that he would go out to the trunk of his car and come back in, and, and shoot up the place. We really don't know the state of mind someone is
Mm-hmm.
in. And so, as an HR person, it is your responsibility. Let's say there is a threat. The proper investigator might be the police, because you may not be skilled
Mm-hmm.
in carrying out a threat assessment. But
Mm-hmm.
what you can do is gather some of the initial information: the who, the what, the how, the where, and provide that to law enforcement, and let law enforcement do what they do best and what they're trained in. So we're not saying that you, Mr. HR, you, Miss HR, have to be the threat assessment individual, but
Mm-hmm.
we are saying that you may have to be the one to do the initial investigation and then turn that over to law enforcement. And
Sure.
that's,
And
again, an extreme situation where we're talking about the potential of someone being hurt.
yeah, and again, this is an investigation. In this case, we're talking about investigating something that is potential. And then let's also talk for a moment about something that's already happened.
Yes.
Let's say there's a rumor or someone has reported that they saw someone stealing from the company, and we have to develop steps for that investigative process. How to communicate? How do we communicate those procedures effectively to everyone in the company? How do we make sure everyone understands how this is going to work?
Yeah, very much so. And there are some companies that, for example, they will contact law enforcement for theft, regardless of if you were accused of stealing, let's say, a cup of coffee, or $10 out of the till. For them, it's a matter of integrity that you took something that didn't belong to you. And again, they may call in an external investigator so that they remain objective. Well, let's deal with some of the most common type of issues in the workplace. They generally fall into one of three categories, maybe four, but generally one of three. Either dealing with attendance issues, where someone should have been at work, either they show up repeatedly tardy, or they don't show up at all. Okay. And they end up in what some organizations call absent time, in which they don't have enough benefit time to cover the absence, or some organizations have a rule that says, 3 or 4 tardies equals 1 absence occurrence, and dealing with those. The second type are what we call performance, where the person just, they're not cutting the mustard. They're not performing at the level. And I'm sure you probably saw this when you was in Hollywood, where there's some actors that, man, they just not aren't making this scene. They're really struggling learning their lines, getting through that part, right? And then the third is behavior. This we're talking about, the example we gave more behavior, theft, sexual misconduct, violent or threatening behavior. And so generally it's going to fall in one of those three buckets: either attendance related, performance related, or behavioral related.
That's perfect. And we have to stop and take a quick commercial break. For all of you who are joining us today, hang in there for just a second. While we're at the break, do us a huge favor. Go ahead and like and subscribe, and shoot a copy of this link to someone else who might enjoy this conversation on HR, or anyone who wants to have a better workplace environment. We will be right back with more and talking about how to prepare an investigation within this system, how we lay the groundwork for fairness. So stay by. We'll be right back.
Get ready to unlock your full potential and transform your vision into reality. Go beyond traditional employee engagement to focus on the whole person with the focused meta mindset system. Experience real, measurable progress towards personal and professional goals. Dr. Lyman Montgomery and Anne Scottlin provide tailored guidance and support to help you overcome obstacles and thrive. Join them for their engaging events, like the Lunch and Learn webinar series, and experience the future of employee engagement. Visit MetaGagement.com now to get started today.
Hi, and welcome back to the second half of our show today here on MetaGagement-HR, helping HR professionals find what is possible and making it probable. And today we're talking about investigative excellence. How do you lay the groundwork for fairness when you're investigating a rumor, a crime, an incident, whether it's before and you've heard rumors or after when it's already happened? How do we do this? And so we are jumping back in here now with my partner and co-host, Dr. Lyman Montgomery. Lyman, take us away about preparing for the investigation.
Yeah, when it comes to preparing for an investigation, it really begins with a model that I created years ago called FACE, F-A-C-E. And it's an investigation model that begins with the F stands for facts. What are the facts of the case? And this is before you probably talk with anyone. What do we currently know? Do we know who is involved? Do we know where the incident took place at? Do we know what the major issues were? Do we know why it happened? Sometimes we don't always know the why. And then you look at, okay, based on the facts, the A stands for action. What action steps should we take? Going back into our previous example, if it's something that is behavioral, such as violence, a threat, then the appropriate action might be to involve law enforcement. It might be to involve an outside, maybe law firm that specialize, let's say, sexual misconduct, and you're not skilled in that. Well, you may hire an outside investigator to come in and conduct, or someone, let's say, from the mental health, if there's been a sexual assault, as well as law enforcement, to deal with the trauma of a person, of persons that may have been subjected to the trauma of sexual abuse. And then the C is causation. Well, what caused this? Was it an argument? Was it environmental? Was it systemic? Was this something that, you had a bunch of people in the lunchroom talking about inappropriate jokes, and it was just like a power keg waiting for someone to throw a match in there. We saw this coming because no one dealt with it early on, and we allowed this to be pervasive. And then the E is there evidence to support? So again, we look at facts, the action steps that were taken. Were you able to identify causation? And is there evidence to support whatever the claim is?
Because evidence is always so important.
Yes.
Because sometimes that really affects how you bring up the discussion to begin with. It's very reminiscent of a personal experience where I don't think anyone's going to watch this who actually knows this person. Like ex of mine that I was married to. There was a lot going on, but I couldn't prove it. Yeah. And this person turned to have a lot of tendencies that were almost professional in covering things up. That's how I will describe that. So in order for me to justify taking action for divorce, because I hadn't been abused directly, I hadn't been, it's really hard when you can't put your finger on it. Yes. And a lot of time has gone by and I tried and I couldn't do it. So I had to hire an investigator to go out. I had to borrow money from a friend. They had to hire an investigator to go out and look and find data, find out actual information that would allow me to justify my decision, especially if it was a decision you didn't really want to do. Yes. So it is really important to get the facts before you just start lobbing general accusations, especially to someone who won't respond.
That's so important. And something else, that you mentioned, and that was hiding. A lot of times when situations happen at work, the perpetrators are very good at hiding the incident. It took place after work in the parking lot. There are no witnesses. It boils down to he said, she said, he said, he didn't say, they said, we thought, maybe we misunderstood. And you have to sometimes look hard to see if there's evidence. And unfortunately, sometimes the conclusion is there's not enough evidence to support. Not saying that it didn't happen, we just don't have enough evidence. And so, in those situations, Ann, what would you do, or what would you advise if there isn't sufficient evidence, but you have an inkling, a feeling that something happened, you just can't prove? What would you recommend happen in those situations?
Yeah, no, I think it's a two-prong approach. For my personal opinion, would be a combination of mediation and training. So if
Mhm.
you have people who are suspect in the conversation, maybe you try to have a more private conversation with one-on-one or in a small group. The person who had the accusation, the person who's accused. You have that kind of conversation. Then maybe you open it up without naming names in a wider audience within the company to just
That's
create a
good.
discussion opportunity, and then ultimately create some new training that involves everyone, which is often considered unfair because the people who don't cause trouble are like, really, I have to do this again? But create some incentives and create some training, and also just it gives you a great opportunity to remind them that you have already created open lines of communication and a safe space to talk, to report, to bring up, so that you can move forward and hopefully avoid an incident getting this far again in the future.
Yeah, that's very good advice. The other thing that I would add as we wrap up, when it comes to the initial investigation, is generally that investigation will end up in some type of report. And you want to make sure that report covers three central areas. A summary of what happened, the conversation, some people call it due process meeting or witness statements, and then the conclusion and recommendation. Because in your particular advice, I love that the recommendation might be, although the evidence does not support the claim, we recommend further training in this area and setting clear expectations and keeping those lines of communication. Excellent advice, Ann. Absolutely excellent advice.
So, in our last couple of minutes here, I know there's often some struggle between internal excavation. It's kind of the same. Investigation, internal investigation versus bringing in an outside investigator. A lot of times, an HR person is looking at a challenge between bringing in someone from the outside. It's going to cost the company more money, which they may or may not already have a budget for. How do you create a criteria to select to make that choice?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you said, training. If you're dealing with a situation that has a major impact, i.e., could lend itself to a lawsuit, then you want to make sure you have experts or people that are skilled in workplace investigations so that they are crossing every T, dotting every I, and they understand how to conduct an
Mm.
interview that doesn't come across as accusatory. And so it is worth the investment of bringing in an outside consultant or a law firm that are skilled in conducting those types of
Mhm.
interviews, or to train your staff on how to do it, because you can do more damage if you come across as accusing someone, especially if it lends itself to, let's say, the person being suspended or fired, only to find out that you had suspended or fired the wrong person. And now you're
Yeah.
looking at hundreds of thousands, not millions of dollars in legal fees. And
Right.
so if you don't have the skill, outsource it.
Excellent, excellent advice, and I think that you would rarely regret that, because it's so much more important to have a proper and accurate resolution than save a little money, and hopefully wise directors in the company will also see that.
Yes.
Not something that you should mess around with and try to avoid. So we've talked today about the importance of having a clear investigative process that helps maintain fairness, having proper training, and having a set of goals and steps to prepare it for an investigation process. So you already have that in place at all times. It already exists, and you know what you'll do, what your next steps will be in any given situation, which I think is super, super useful. Before we go, Lyman, is there a time and place, do you think, to bring in individuals outside of HR, and when is that appropriate?
Yeah, I think again, it depends on the situation, and it also depends on the expertise that they have that can complement your current HR department. I always believe you start with an assessment, and I think every HR department should do this. You should conduct an internal assessment to say, if we were faced with a major situation, are we prepared to handle this internally, or is this something we need to look externally for and bring in either consultants, coaches that are skilled in either training us in how to do it or conduct it themselves. And I think that's the first step, is to be honest and assess the skill level, the talent level of your HR department, to see if they have the knowledge, the skill, and the expertise in conducting workplace investigations, and at what level.
Absolutely.
And at what level.
Absolutely. And at what level, for sure. So if you found this helpful, I think there has been a lot of great information here today, whether it's new info to you or review in HR or in any part of business where you find yourself. I hope this has been useful. And if so, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to this feed, and send in your comments and questions to us. You can email us directly through our website. You can leave comments here in the feed. We would love to hear from you, hear your questions, and hear any other topics that you would really like us to bring up and discuss here on the show. And next time, we're going to dive into part 2, how the actual investigation process works, focusing on interview techniques. We're going to talk about evidence collection and again, ensuring fairness every step of the way. So you will not want to miss that.
Yes.
And thanks again for tuning in today. Remember, we're here streaming every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. GMT. And you can copy and paste this link. And even when it's no longer live, you can send it to anyone else who might appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you then. Thank you so much, Lyman.
Thank you. Enjoy. Till next time, everyone.
See you then.